Hello everyone, so I'm doing my case presentation on the Matador Achievement Center, which is located at Cal State Northridge. Um, the Matador Achievement Center basically works with professional student athletes on campus. My position there, I was a learning specialist, which I will meet with the student between around 30 minutes to an hour, 1 to 4 times a week or bi-weekly. Basically what we will focus on is study skills, test prep techniques, alternative learning methods, structure study time, and campus resource referrals. Then, as a learning specialist, I will report weekly on student athletes' academics and academics performance, such as grades that are self-reported, faculty verified, or that are pulled from Moodle by the student. So I decided to do my presentation on this student named Carlos. His background is he's a first generation college student. He's a student athlete. He's 22 years old. His first language is Spanish. He was born and raised in Puerto Rico and only has his aunt in the United States. He's a CPA major in the emphasis of film production. He's an only child, and he came to pursue the American dream. The theory that I'm gonna focus on is critical race theory. Critical race theory is a framework that can be used to theorize and examine and challenge the ways race and racism implicitly and explicitly impact on social structures, practice, and discourse. Then I'm focus on a strength-based approach. A strength-based approach is a specific method of working with and resolving problems experienced by the presenting person. It does not attempt to ignore the problem and the difficulties. It attempts to identify the positive basis of the person's resources and strengths that will lay the basis to address the challenges resulting from the problems. When I'm working with Carlos, if I have to do a DSM diagnose, I will diagnose Carlos with major depression. So here are like the definition that I got from the DSM. It says either is 5 or more of the following symptoms have been presented during the same two-week period and presented a change from previous functions. At least one of the symptoms, either 1 is depressed mood, or 2, loss of interest or pleasure. Note, do not include the symptoms that are clearly attributed to another medical condition. For most of the times when I will meet up with Carlos, he did mention that he did feel depressed nearly every day. He reported feeling like empty, sad, hopeless, which kind of got in the way of him finishing his assignments. Also, he also expressed to me that at some point he was feeling worthless or excessive inappropriate guilt, and he was not able to concentrate. He just didn't have the energy to do a lot of things. And another thing, while working with him, I realized that I would diagnose him with an anxiety disorder, so it will be a dual diagnosis. And what anxiety disorder says is excessive anxiety, worry, apprehensive expectation occurring more days than not for at least 6 months about a number of events or activities such as work, school, performance. The individual finds it difficult to control the worry. The anxiety or worry are associated with 3 or more of the following 6 symptoms. with at least some of the symptoms having been present for more days than not for the past 6 months. So he'd always mentioned to me he was always restless. Um, he had a difficult time concentrating or finishing his assignments. He hardly got any sleep. He had a lot of time. He had a lot of difficult time falling asleep. So that will be the diagnosis that I would do for Carlos. When we're talking about critical race theory assessment / intervention, the assessment from critical race theory, which I use Professor Pai's PowerPoint. It mentions that it looks at how racism shapes the education of people of color compared to the education of the dominant group. When I say dominant group, I mean white. Another aspect of the theory is to see how education institutions function to maintain racism, sexism, and classism. And there will be how resilient students of color are when it comes to facing racism and other forms of oppression. When it comes to interventions, either we analyze or give examples of a marginalized identities and stereotypes, and being mindful of the individual's identity and intersections as well. When using critical race theory assessment / intervention, when working with Carlos, I kind of did realize that he came from he had his own unique background, and he had a lot of identities that intersect with one another. But also, I realized that he had a hard time adapting with the institution, just due to first of all for being a first generation college student, and he had a difficult time navigating the institution, especially communicating with professors and like asking for help. There's a lot of things that I realized that Carlos had to navigate, which it was very difficult for him sometimes. Not only that, but the transition from leaving from Puerto Rico to the United States, what he mentioned to me, he did that to pursue the American dream and to pursue a better life. He was on a full scholarship here at CSUN, so when working with him in our sessions, we kind of like worked on like how is he able to navigate the institution to better have better grades and like have to be successful, since he was on a full scholarship. He is on a full scholarship. In the lens of when I look in a critical lens theory, is more like looking of all the systems can have an effect on Carlos, and how can I better assist him navigating those systems, but also letting him know he's very resilient when navigating the systems. And when working with Carlos, I realized that I did a lot of strength-based approach by being a good listener, focusing on the unique strengths and capabilities of the person, the capacity in building the goal and the process. Interventions that I used with Carlos when using a strength-based approach was creating productive skills, strategies to continue growth rather than focusing on self-defeating, setting realistic goals and expectations for himself. Also the interventions are client-driven, relationship focus. So with Carlos, he had a difficult time keeping, as I mentioned, keeping up with his schoolwork. One thing that we use as a strength based approach, uh, I use as a strength based approach with him. We created a calendar where he was able to lay out all his assignments, the dates that the assignments were due, and I provided him with the resources like laying that out and stuff for himself, and kind of for him to like be realistic. How many hours was the assignments gonna take place? How many hours the assignment was gonna how many hours was the assignment gonna take to finish. I was able to like always like ask him how he was doing, always making sure that his well-being was, he was doing well. We always had like this like trust and one another, and like he was very open to like finding other techniques that could work for him in accomplishing his assignments. He started having open communication with the professors. He also started asking for help, using the resources that were provided for him. Everything was mainly on his time, and I always try to work with his strengths and like always use words of affirmation with him. But he was one of the best students, I would say one of the most difficult students to work with. But at the end, it was very rewarding to see that he was applying all these techniques, and he was navigating these institutions, and he actually got his grades up, which I was really happy at the end of the day to work with him. Um, and that's about it for my presentation.